Hollywood is very well known for being far left-leaning, and there is a blacklist if you're a conservative or a centrist or a right-leaning person in Hollywood. Chances are you're not going to get hired, especially the more high-profile you are. In fact, when I worked in Hollywood, there was a kind of like support group that was run by Gary Sinise. It was called Friends of Abe, and it was basically a group of people who weren't leftist that worked in Hollywood, and they go to dinners or these like parties and events and network with one another. But also it was mostly just like, like almost like an Alcoholics Anonymous thing where like, all these people are having to hide who they truly are in Hollywood in order to just continue working. And they needed like some type of emotional support network. And, Jon Voight was there and like some like more higher profile people, but it was actually a very kind of like emotional thing. I went to a few of these meetings, even though I didn't work in the industry at the time, but there were like people there who would literally start breaking down crying. And this was in the Obama era, right? Where basically like their kids were coming home from school and basically, bad mouthing their parents for not supporting Obama or something like that. And they just felt like, like my kids are slipping away from me. I can't instill like my values to them and all this other stuff. So it was a very emotional thing. And it's kind of funny because Zachary Levi, whose like big breakout role was Chuck, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Dutch, we've had Adam Baldwin on our show before. We interviewed him. Adam Baldwin is a straight up gangster, and he is not afraid to basically, espouse his political beliefs. And in the Chuck show, he played like a far right Reagan loving, like CIA assassin guy, like unapologetic. But you can tell that like, maybe some of that rubbed off on Zachary Levi
a little bit.
But what was interesting about this article is that they kind of pointed out that Zachary Levi's movie career has been kind of floundering. Like his Harold and the Purple Crayon movie was a big bomb. The Shazam movies have underperformed. And so what they say in this article is that Zachary Levi has actually left Hollywood. He's moved out to Texas, got his own ranch out there, and he's focusing more on faith-based projects, kind of like how Jim Caviezel is doing. And so like they're saying that what he's actually doing here with this endorsement is basically a way to try to salvage his floundering Hollywood career by appealing to the MAGA base. Sure. And I think that that's a little bit cynical on the part of the Hollywood Reporter, but at the same time, I can kind of see the logic behind it. So I want to go to you, Odin. What do you think about this? Do you think that this is Zachary Levi basically committing career suicide, or is this a calculated move to try to pivot his career and consolidate his fan base?
Yeah, I mean, because as you were saying all that, I was looking into his IMDb because it's like, is he really like canceled or like, blacklisted or whatever it might be? He's got 7 upcoming projects. I mean, he's in pre-production on at least 3 films. He's in production on 1, post-production on another, and then 2 that have been completed. And whereas a couple of them, it seems like they might have that more, I guess, faith-based type story to them, there's a bunch of the others that just seem more like independent films. And so it seems more like, if anything, he's maybe moving out of that Hollywood system, maybe more so moving into like the independent scene or the low to mid-tier budget scene, which is fine. I mean, as someone who enjoys those films, and typically those films are often better than much of the major big budget Hollywood fare these days, I think that's a good place to go. I wouldn't say that he's trying to appeal necessarily to that base, though, because even though he has endorsed someone like Trump, he did not do that like out of just some like change of heart or anything like this. He was someone that was supporting RFK, and it was only when RFK started to endorse him that he said, like, by proxy, that he would endorse, right? And so it's not that he's a full-on Trump supporter. It's more of like, in this election, he's going to go with this guy versus this other person, right? Versus Kamala. And so I think that ultimately that's obviously going to hurt him in the eyes of a lot of the woke elitists in Hollywood, but it also sounds like he still has several films that have yet to come out, several films that are still in production, or at least in the process of being in pre-production for. And so I think that ultimately he'll be fine. And I think that especially once think about it in long term, right? Once this election's over, right? If things go a certain way, then that will be theoretically the last time that we have, right, the big orange man that everyone always freaks out about every single time his name gets brought up. And so I think that will inevitably cause things to maybe cool down a little bit. Maybe that's me looking at it with a little bit more, hope and optimism than maybe anybody else would. But my hope is that, this would be something where it wouldn't have a long-term impact on his career. I think more so, if we're going to point out anything as to leading to him to get less projects, it's going to be to box office success, which is something that happened long before, or the lack thereof, box office success, which has happened before any of this is going on. Like you mentioned, Harold of the Purple Crayon flopped at the box office. Shazam 2, massive flop at the box office. And so he hasn't really had a huge box office hit, in fact, really ever. Because even the first Shazam film, I liked it a lot. I thought it was the best DC film to exist within that universe that was being established at that time. But even that one wasn't this huge moneymaker in comparison to some of the other ones.
Well, Tom, one of the interesting things about this is how they talk about Shazam, because when you become the lead in like a big Hollywood comic book movie, you tend to think, oh, this is going to be my launching pad. This is going to be the thing that puts me up into like the A-list tier of, Hollywood celebrities, like it happened with Chris Hemsworth, it happened with Chris Evans and stuff like that. But it hasn't happened for Zachary Levi. And so, the question is why? Like, was it really Zachary Levi's fault that Shazam sucked, or was it Warner Brothers and DC?
It hasn't really translated for any of these folks. Name me one of these individuals who's actually been able to bank a career off of being in one of these superhero movies.
Yeah, I don't even think Chris Evans.
No, Chris Evans was already established somewhat before that.
They were talking about how he's trying to go the John Krasinski / Chris Pratt route, right? Of playing the geeky guy in a television show and then moving on to movies.
Yeah, but in this case, I feel like this is just a pile on to try and cancel this guy. I think Odin's right. If anything was going to cancel him, it was the fact that he just hasn't had a box office hit. He just doesn't have wide audience appeal to open a film at this point.
I think he picks the wrong projects.
It could just very well be that. It could be, because honestly, I don't have anything personal towards the guy one way or the other. I don't love him. I don't hate him. I thought he was fine. He was serviceable as Shazam. But as far as being in a superhero movie anymore, I think a lot of people have learned that is not your launching pad to anything, because it hasn't quite helped Brie Larson's career, and she had an Oscar before it. Right. For some dumb reason. And I still say the only reason she got that Oscar is because that kid was a better actor than she ever was. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. Again, I just, at this point, I feel like they're just dogpiling on him, and they're trying to get the quote unquote right people to realize that this guy is one of them. So we got to go after him. This is the same thing where I was talking about earlier and alluding to that whole Sebastian Stan being in that Trump movie that's coming out or whatever. Like, it's like these idiots, it's being made for the people that hate Trump, right? But they're rejecting it because it's about Trump. And then the rest of the audience is like, well, why would I go see this when all you're going to do is shit on the guy? So nobody's going to go see this movie. And they're going out there trying to warn people, or warn him, that over half the audience is going to quit watching your movies now because of this shit. It's like, well, first of all, you're just assuming that many people even know who the fuck Sebastian Stan is. Yes, he's Winter Soldier, but if you tell people that, they'll know who you're talking about. But if you say Sebastian Stan, they'll be like, huh?
Yeah. If I told my wife, hey, babe, you want to see that new Sebastian Stan movie? She's like, who? What's funny? If I say you want to go see that Zachary Levi movie, like, that's more recognizable.
He was on television, though. That's a big difference. See, that's what he's got going for him. So if anything, I think this is just a sign that Hollywood's turning against him. So what does this mean? He's not going to get the offers like he used to. He's going to have to start probably making some movies like Angel Studios and stuff like that.
Right. I was just going to say, if he does feel like he's getting blacklisted, catering to that MAGA crowd that watches movies like the Angel Studios film that blew up last year. What was
Sound of Freedom?
Sound of Freedom. You start going into that niche, into those people, you're going to be okay.
The thing is, though, like, so this is not like it wasn't like all of a sudden he started supporting, independence and freedom.
Right.
It wasn't just, RFK turned him. The guy has always felt this way. Him and Baldwin have always been hand in hand in that. In fact, a lot of the cast that was on Chuck, if you go back and watch the interviews, they're very USA, rah, rah, rah oriented.
Baldwin is next level.
Yeah, he is.
Well, Baldwin's next level. But that entire cast, like you watch the interviews, and they're very, centrist. In fact, before RDJ and before any of this, in 2019, Zach was flamed for saying, "Don't take the vaccine if you don't need it."
Mm-hmm.
It's a silly thing to support. And then people are flaming me. It's like, oh, so now we're all defending big pharma?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're doing? If you don't need a vaccine, why are you taking it? He was speaking truth to power when it was the worst possible time to do so. Like the guy is honestly just a logical, normal, good dude, and he has he has the testicles to stand up for things he believes in.
Good for him.
I give him props.
Brian, a little bit to go off of what you just said, which is how this article in the Hollywood Reporter frames this whole thing, where he says Levi was endorsing a convicted felon and adjudicated sex offender in reference to Trump. And then it goes on to say the anti-vaxxer actor has done weirder things than that, like support Robert Kennedy Jr. for president.
It's just a hit piece.
And how many of these fuckers have said we should let Roman Polanski back in the country? He didn't do anything wrong.
The best thing that he can do, and Mark Wahlberg and a bunch of other professionals in Hollywood have proved it, is become a producer early, start producing your own work. And when you get in on the financial level of Hollywood, you're a lot harder to ignore. Right?
But Brett, I think this goes to like a broader issue in Hollywood, which is basically like Hollywood does not allow for like wrong think, right? If you're someone of any type of profile in Hollywood, especially like if you're like a leading man type, if you espouse anything that's against the status quo, which is like the hyper left liberal kind of like belief system, there is a Hollywood blacklist. There is stuff where, because Odin pointed out, like a lot of
what it is, the extreme left.
Yeah, a lot of Zachary Levi's stuff is like kind of like geared towards independent movies and stuff like that, and that's because Hollywood doesn't want to cast him. And I think part of it is, yes, he's not the box office draw that he was, but I mean, like he's not getting any TV shows, like he's not showing up in any pilots. So, do you know anything about like how Hollywood blacklists people for wrong thing?
Who is this? Was it for me?
Yeah, that was for you, Brett.
I lost you at the end there. Look, a lot of the times there are so many avenues now. I don't know if it's necessarily just blacklisting, but look, Gina Carano steps out of the public, of the right thing for them, and then she's relegated to Daily Wire movies. And I don't mean that in a rude way. I'm just saying that you're pushed to these alternate means of finding entertainment. But like I heard somebody mention Angel Studios right now. There's a lot of other things that you can do in Hollywood. He's got 7 things in production right now. If he starts producing, one of my favorite things ever is every time Mel Gibson has a new movie that he's producing coming out, there are positive articles written about it because, he's, there's still a circle jerk of information going on in Hollywood. So I've actually seen on Cinema Blend, like an article being really, really positive about something that he made right next to an article talking about how he's the worst person on earth. Right. So it's all about finding where he needs to go in there, because I don't know if it's necessarily that the blacklist is going to find him. I don't think that he was a big enough box office star to really say that he was, a big draw anyway.
The thing with Mel Gibson now is these people have a hard time trying to keep him canceled when they've all said worse things about Jews than he ever did.
Yeah, it's true that, bro.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad someone said that.
But also it has to be mentioned that we're also living in an age where the movie star is not really there anymore, right? Like we have this perception of it.
That's
but as far
what I
as
was
like
getting at,
box office draw, right? We really like, even if you go to someone like Tom Cruise can drive a lot of people, but he has to also be in the right film and the right project, right? That's why we can look and find
look at what
that
Mission Impossible did.
Pick the right,
yeah, exactly, right. And so you have to have the right film. Right film, right? And like, there's so many things that have to be right, but also it brings up something that I don't think was on our list today, but it's something that's be interesting to watch because it actually relates to this topic. Is how Terrifier 3 is currently doing some really, really amazing things. This is a movie that came out of basically outside of Hollywood completely. and it is not even going through the MPA. And if you don't know what the MPA is, you know how before trailers you always get that green screen of this has been approved by the
Which
MPA.
I can't believe theaters are carrying it. Oh, and that's
Yes.
the thing that's got me
That's the
completely
thing.
like.
This is
blown
showing
away.
that an outside film for $2 million done outside of the Hollywood system can break through even into the local theaters, right? You can actually now make a movie outside of that system and actually, as long as it's good. Again, that's the other thing. You have to have an audience. You have to have people that want to go see it. But this is showing that it is possible. And so I think that going back to
what's
Zachary
it
Levi,
called?
it's called Terrifier 3.
Terrifier 3, but Odin, an outgrowth of that is basically theaters are on their heels.
Yeah.
They're looking for anything that will bring people into the seats.
Yeah.
And so like they're willing to like go past like the MPA or MPAA.
But
however you
imagine
wanna say it.
if more and more people start to do that, though, because now the theater is going to have so many more options outside of Hollywood, and then Hollywood's the one who ends up getting, shafted in the end because they're the ones still making films that no one wants to watch.
Well, and they used to do this stuff, right? It used to be the drive-in circuit. That's where we got the B movies. That's where movies like Evil Dead and stuff came from, and Dawn of the Dead and such, and Cannibal Holocaust and all these other films back in the day that you would consider like video nasties and such. So like something like Terrifier isn't surprising to me, but I'm glad you brought it up because yes, it's something that does need to be pointed out. It does need to be talked about and said, look, this is what you can do. Because they used to do this, but Hollywood closed that off, right? That's what killed the drive-ins in America.
Yeah, but Dutch Butters, there does seem to be some type of demand for like an alt Hollywood where you have stars like, Roseanne, James Woods, Gina Carano, like all these like recognizable names who've essentially been canceled by Hollywood for their political beliefs, and they're looking for like outlets in which like they can, continue to make films and TV shows and projects that they care about. And I think Zachary Levi is just the latest in this thing where he's basically like looking for an alternative to Hollywood. And I think audiences are too. What's your take on this?
No, I think you're correct. I think there's a large section of the people out there like us who are looking for entertainment that doesn't come from that woke Hollywood brand. It's why we listen to stuff like the podcasts and stuff that we listen to. It's why we listen to all these comedians that are just anti-woke. Joe Rogan, perfect example. We don't all agree with everything he has to say, but we all listen to him because he's tries to be a straight shooter and he lets everybody speak their mind. He has all kinds of people on that show. Some of these Netflix specials, Netflix doesn't have a great track record, but they also let some of these guys say what they want with these specials that they do. There's a large audience, a huge audience out there of people just like us who are looking for fun entertainment, and it doesn't all have to be crap. I mean, look at the Tim Allen stuff. My wife is still watching his shows religiously every day that they're on. You have to go to these like weird, obscure cable channels to find some of this stuff, but it is out there, and those are the stuff that I see on my TV when I get home in the afternoon being watched. So I know there's an audience for this stuff.
Brian, I want to throw this to you to wrap this up with, because in this Hollywood Reporter article, they do take shots at Trump. They do take shots at Zachary Levi for his political beliefs. But just last week, we read another Hollywood Reporter puff piece about Rachel Zegler, where they very prominently talked about her support for Palestine, free Palestine, and, when I was working in Hollywood, like the big thing about Hollywood was that it's run by Jews, essentially. And, the most powerful people in Hollywood, at least when I was there, were Jewish. And so, like, you recently had this issue with the Scream sequel, where some of the actors came out in support of Palestine. I think that was last year after like the October 6th attack.
Melissa Barrera.
October 8th, yeah. And
The
basically,
deadliest day in history.
yeah, and basically the Jews in Hollywood all banded together and got these girls fired. So like there is this divide there where it's like, like Hollywood tends to hate people of the Jewish persuasion, but at the same time, they're more than happy to, prop up these people who just spread hate and divisiveness and all this other stuff. So what was your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's, by the way, Jews definitely do run large portions of Los Angeles. I worked in the fashion district for many years, and every one of my bosses were like super Jews. Good guys. I'm not.
Super
talking trash.
Jews. What were the superpowers?
Demonetized.
And when I say super Jews, look,
There's one thing you just
I
can't
can
ever
say
talk
that
about.
I am Jewish. Look,
How many things are you, man? It's like
well, I'm a mutt, bro. I'm like my mom is like Jewish and Mongolian, so. So dude,
Wow,
I mean, when I say super Jew, I'm talking about, like,
that would make for an interesting dinner table.
Why all of a sudden am I picturing Mel Brooks coming in a Superman outfit going,
I know, right?
I am
Isn't like-
super Jew. I don't work on
Yeah.
Sundays, though.
Isn't 90% of the world's population part Mongolian though? So
no, she's like
Genghis Khan.
like Mongo, not like I'm have the 1% gene. No, she's actually like her mother was a Mongolian prostitute, and her dad was a devout Jew.
Is there a Bigfoot in somebody's background? I keep hearing a big growl.
Listen, let me finish my point. But
Okay.
it is generally ran by
Whatever, Jew boy.
a lot of Jews. So you can't just walk around being like, free Palestine from the something to the sea, whatever. Basically saying, let's get rid of like your home world, your hometown, your home country. Like, that's going to be a problem. Even if they're hyper liberals and like they want to support whatever the agenda is, like they're Jews first. That's it. Whether they like you or not, like they're Jews first. And you can't just walk around screaming for the extermination of their people. You can't do that.
No, I'm not supposed to do that for any people.